Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dustina. This is Spiritual Boujee Astrology, and we're going to take a look at the astrological transits of December 25th to December 31st. It is the last week of December. It is the last week of 2023, and it is by far the most dynamic week when it comes to the transitional timeline that I've been talking about that was going on through the month of December and taking us into 2024. There's a lot of energy that is meant to play out literally this week. Before I go into any kind of recap of the prior weeks or go into the week ahead, I want to talk about something that came to me in my meditation during that Mercury Cazimi. And I had said that in the Mercury retrograde video and in the December month ahead video, like, look, I'm really looking forward to this Mercury Cazimi, and I don't know why. But I knew something profound was meant to come through in my meditation, and I've been looking forward to it. And this is what kind of came through for me. From December 25th to January 1st, I'm going to break my normal habit of how I do my services, because usually I would prefer for people to do a pre-recorded birth chart reading before we ever do one-on-ones. I'm going to break this week. There's so much dynamic energy that's going on that I know people are going to need help in regards to spiritual services. They're going to need help in regards to like how to get through the moment and how to understand what energies are impacting them. And as opposed to like charging like a normal rate for my services, what I've decided to do and what my intuition and my meditation told me to do is from December 25th, so Christmas Day, all the way to New Year's Day. So the end of the Mercury retrograde is January 1st. So from December 21st, 5th, December 25th, I make fun of myself. It's fine. December 25th to January 1st, all of my one-on-one services are going to be donation-based. One, we are all going through shit when it comes to the financials. Inflation is horrible. But two, I don't want somebody to sit here and be in a situation that they feel like the world is against them, but they don't know how to ask for help. And they don't necessarily have the money to immediately pay for an astrologer. I'm okay with that. The week that we're going into, with the condition of Mercury, logic is not our friend. What makes logical sense is going to be hard to make clear. It's going to be hard to make sense of. There's a lot of anxiety that starts today. I'm recording the morning of Christmas Eve. I did on my notes yesterday while the moon was still in Taurus. But whenever it came to like this week going forward, I wanted to make sure that I was in this Mercury energy, in this moon in Gemini energy before I actually did the recording. Because the thing is, I've been saying that this is going to be a high anxiety week for months. But I could have been wrong. Obviously, it's been a very high anxiety energy and it's just starting. There's a lot of mental energy going on. I'm a natal Mercury in Gemini. High anxiety is not a big deal. Doing multiple things all at once, not a big deal for me. I'm a multitasker. It happens. But a lot of you are not. And if you're in this energy and you're feeling like the world is against you, you're feeling like things are not going your way, you're feeling like things are not clear for you, or you get blindsided by something this week, specifically the energies that start to play out after the full moon in Cancer. The full moon in Cancer is the 26th, guys. I'm anticipating a lot of people are going to need help in regards to hope and in regards to faith. You're going to need somebody that's going to help you on a spiritual level. And I would rather put that service out there as more of a donation-based situation than anything else. So if you're just now hearing me for the first time, or if somebody that already listens to me suddenly sent you my video and like, you need to really listen to this girl, that's okay. It's not about how long you've been listening to me. It's about being able to help people in the time that they need it. And I feel like a lot of people are going to need help this week in a way that shouldn't be determined by a fee. So all of my one-on-one services, so I'm doing this very different than what I would normally do. All of my one-on-one services, I'll do a time limit on each one of them, probably about 45 minutes. are going to be donation based from December 25th to January 1st. If you need help, my contact information is in the description, and I'll probably go ahead and link my Cash App and my Venmo in there anyways. I don't necessarily like to do that, but it is what it is. I know people need help right now. I know people are going to need help this week. I have felt it for quite some time, and I want to be that person that is able to help people. This is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. You'll see that too. Anyways, there is a lot of anxiety going into the weekend, going from this weekend, going into the week. Once the moon went into Gemini, the mental energy picked up. A lot of people, December 23rd going into Christmas Eve, and a Christmas Eve going into Christmas Day, mental energy. Suddenly we're doing 20 things at once, 30 things at once, 40 things at once. And if other people are not hitting that flow the way they're supposed to, it's going to be very easy to hit that snap. Snip, 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 bitch, 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 grump, 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 grump. Very, very easy. We start the week with the moon in Gemini. There's a lot of carryover energy for some people that goes from the weekend going into Monday. And there's a lot of things that have gone on throughout this Mercury retrograde that has changed a dynamic. This Mercury retrograde started out in Capricorn, and the entire time Mercury was going backwards in the sky, it was getting closer to the sun. And unlike previous Mercury retrogrades that we have, this one was in what is called an Antiscia to the sun. So we've had this resistancy all through the month of December, specifically since the Mercury retrograde started and since that new moon in Sagittarius, being resistant towards something. But in that Mercury Cazimi, there was a revelation. There was something that became clear. There's something that came to light. There's something that came to the surface. And during that time span, what really came through for me is that this next few weeks, especially while Mercury is still retrograde, the most important thing is to have hope and faith over logic. Because when it comes to parts of this week, logic is not our friend. What would make logical sense doesn't seem to play out well. We're going to try to deal with something. We're going to try to, go to a store. We're trying to do a return. We're trying to do these things. And all of a sudden, it feels like every little thing is kind of popping up against you. If you are fine in the energy, you can be seeing other people start to lose their mind. And it might not be necessarily what's going on in that moment. It might just be like a buildup that ends up being a projection onto other people. This is not an easy week for people that have anxiety. This is not going to be an easy week for people that are trying to heal and overcome certain things that can be easily triggered back into an old way of doing things, back into old habits, back into old vices. This is not a good week for you guys. Where we go moving forward needs to have an energy tied to faith, to hope, to belief. We need to believe that everything can be fixed, that everything can be overcome. The types of disruptions that hit this week, because there will be disruptions. There will be disruptions. Once the moon goes into Cancer, oh babies, there will be disruptions. There will. The kinds of disruptions that are going to come through, though, is going to be very different for everybody. But it is the disruptions that come through this week that are going to result in how things can turn around. Because as we get deeper into the week and all the way to January 1st, we're going to have two planets that are currently retrograde, currently messing with everybody, that are going to turn direct. But they're going to hit a hyperized point of anxiety and frustration before they turn direct. Many of us have been going through certain things where we have been, again, being met with resistance, or we've been resistant to something else. And last week during the Mercury Cazimi, for a lot of people, there was a clarity. There was the first glimpse and glimmer of clarity. And even though we still have a pattern of resistance going through the rest of the week after the Cazimi and into this next week, still very strong patterns of resistance, there is still things that are going to create emotional clarity. And it is going to show you something has, in fact, turned around. The thing that you've been resistant towards has the ability to change. Well, I don't know if I want to change jobs. I don't know if I want to go in this other direction. I'm happy with where I'm at. I like my rut, because you're stubborn and you don't like change. I always make fun of the stubborn people. You're stubborn and you don't like change, but there's this possibility, this hopefulness in the energy of turning that around. In some ways, if you've remained resistant, then there's going to be something that comes through that really makes you rethink why you have been so resistant. You get a job opportunity, a clean slate, a fresh start. You have that holiday, that second holiday meeting where you see the dynamic of an elder has changed. This is a process for many of us that we started all the way back in November. The first round of seeing how responsibilities and roles and traditions and elders have changed came through back at Thanksgiving, back in those last few weeks of November. And now as we're getting into this holiday, there's going to be the next round of people that are going to see that change. But even in that moment, there's still a resistance. There's still something that doesn't feel clear. There's still something that we are questioning. If we are in that mode of resistance towards something or someone, then what's going to happen this next week is going to force you to reconcile with that resistance. And it's not necessarily going to be between you and that person. It might be something else completely, an outside situation that all of a sudden, whenever you need a certain kind of help, ironically enough, you need the person that you've been resisting for some reason. And their ability to step in, their ability to provide aid, their ability to provide help is what changes the dynamic and changes the mindset. Some of us, we are the ones that are going to be helping the others. I started the episode talking about how I'll be doing mine. One element of it. I know there's going to be other stuff too. I've already seen it. I have felt it. Then that's a different conversation. And I've already had my first Mercury retrograde thing. It's super funny. I woke up and my phone said it's on SOS mode. Didn't know that this was a thing, but apparently I had a cell phone provider carrier on this phone yesterday, but this morning it is gone. And I don't know if I'm going to actually get this fixed before Christmas or if this is going to be my December 26th hot mess thing. I don't know. It'll be fun. It is what it is. Mercury's in retrograde. Happy Mercury retrograde, everybody. Happy Mercury retrograde. Anyways, let's get into Monday. Monday. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays. Happy Yule. Whatever you celebrate. Happy everything. Now, in the first part of Christmas Day, I actually really love the energy. And one of the things I said at the end of last week's episode about going into this week's episode is like parts of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day does have a healing energy to it. And this energy, it was activating on Christmas Eve, but it's actually exact on Christmas Day. And that is Venus and her trine to Neptune. Now, the Venus-Neptune trine, it goes the most exact between 11:01 and 11:20 a.m. Central Standard Time. I've got it at 11:30. I'm not bumping it 10 minutes. It's fine. It's close enough for government work. Here we go. Venus trine Neptune. This can be a very healing energy. This can be a very romanticized energy. There can be a lot of nostalgia, a lot of dreaminess, a lot of melancholy for certain people. We can wake up and we can have like just those elements of nostalgia. Like we're starting with our favorite Christmas movie. We're starting with our hot cocoa. We're starting with whatever we're doing for Christmas Eve. and there can be a bit of a melancholy. But again, there's also this element that a lot of people are dealing with holidays for the very first time without a certain person, because we've had a lot of loss that transpired through July all the way up to October. So some people, it's been even November and stuff like that. But that purging energy that happened while Venus was in Leo, it kind of hit a peak as we went through eclipse season, and that was October. And then once we got into November, we started to move into the transitional energy of moving away from what needed to be cleansed and purged and released. And now we're trying to find the different footing. We're in a transitional energy. Some of us are going to wake up in our emotions on Christmas Day, because it is that first holiday without a significant other, without grandpa, without auntie, without somebody that used to make the difference in this holiday. And again, if I have people that are listening to me and you need somebody to be able to talk to get through this holiday, message me. I'll set up a one-on-one. I'm staying as open as I can possibly be on Christmas Day because I already know what's about to happen. There can be an emotional vulnerability in this energy. We can find ourselves understanding the elements of nostalgia, and we have that muscle memory of Christmas Eve. I want to go watch this movie, and I would normally do it this way with grandma, with this person, and I can't do it this way. And some part of you can't even make the effort to put that movie on because it's going to hurt too bad. And then you don't necessarily know what to do. And your mind gets to racing, and your mind gets to overthinking. And there can be, as much as can be a romanticized, healing, nostalgic energy for those people that are coming together in a positive way, for some people, there's going to be the heaviness to it that is going to create overthinking and mental anxiety. And it can be very much a trigger. There's going to be a mixed element of everybody when it comes to Christmas Day. Venus trine Neptune can be very, very healing. But the other thing that I want to bring up about Christmas Day is that Venus is also going over the Mars rebirth point. What started a lot of this transitional energy that we're in was that Mars rebirth that happened in November. So I'm specifically going to say this next part. Think of the things that started to reveal themselves, that started to change, that started to come through November 11th to November 19th. Think of the people that you were talking to. Think of what was trying to happen. We were in a lot of indifference in a lot of ways. Excuse me. We had a lot of indifference going on in a lot of ways. But there was something that very much came to light that started a whole new cycle back at that Mars rebirth. And that Mars rebirth was specific to November 17th. But that Mars, remember, Mars was in a conjunction to the new moon just a few days earlier. So that was November 13th. We had a lot of things in the opposition to Uranus. So this is why I'm giving a week's set of dates. Think of the things that were going on for you back between November 11th into November 19th. Because a lot of what was going on at that time can also be coming back up right now in a very positive, helpful way, with Venus going over this 25-degree mark. And this is going to be going through December 25th and December 26th. At this moment, Venus just hit 25 degrees 0 minutes. This is where she's going to be for almost the next 24 hours. It's just short of that. So think back to what was going on in that timeline, because elements of what does come through in the melancholy or even manifestation sense can speak back to that timeline, can be going back to those conversations. Okay. Moon-wise, there's not a whole lot of transits going on until we get into the evening time. So I started this at 11:30 a.m. Now I'm going to bump this up into the evening, and we're going to get to about 7:30. Yes. Between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, so adjust for your individual time zones, the moon will hit an opposition to Mars. Mentally, we can't keep it together. We can't sit still. In some ways, this can be like we get to the evening time and all of a sudden everybody wants to take an action. Now, that can be a positive sense. It can be in the sense of like, hey, let's go look at the Christmas lights and let's just go drive around town. Or sometimes there's like certain parks or something in your general area where you can go look at lights. You can go do something, and there's an action that we take in the evening time. That's not a high anxiety situation. It's really not. But there can be other things that come up where we want to take an action that has nothing to do with Christmas lights that can lead to things in the overnight hours of Christmas Day going into the 26th. And that's the one I'm a little more keyed into. Now, the moon is in Mercury's sign. It's in an opposition to Mars, but it's also entering a square with Neptune. We have an influence building in. We have something else that can start to flood the senses. We can have something else that we want to experience that can take over the senses. And if you are one of those people that you want to go to the movies on Christmas night, because I know a lot of people like you guys go to the movies. This is great for going to the movies. This is great for going to look at Christmas lights. Please understand that it's Mercury retrograde and everybody's going to be a little high anxiety, and it'd be very easy to have people with attitude issues. I'm not sugarcoating that, but at the same time, this can be a really good night for an experience. However, some people like to go to the bar, and that one I don't like. I want to be super clear about that. So we're going to keep going on the screen, and then I'll explain why I'm saying that. So between 7 and 9, moon opposite Mars. From 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., December 26th, the moon will be going through its square with Neptune. I don't like this because we can have, when the Neptune is in the higher authority of a square, it's usually because we want something to flood our senses. So again, parts of this can be, I want to go through an experience and I want to go to the movies, midnight premiere, something like that. That's good. I don't care about that one. But other people are going to want to go out. They're going to go to a house party. They're going to go to the bar. They're going to go somewhere. And some people, whenever it comes to Christmas Day, they will drown themselves in their sorrow. I do not like Christmas night for this because of the Neptunian energy involved. Because right as the moon is starting to go through its square with Neptune, it's also entering its opposition to Mercury. The moon is in Mercury's sign. Mercury is retrograde. Mercury is in its detriment. Mercury is entering its second square to Neptune. And there can be something here where we're not thinking clearly, and it has a repercussion. It has another layer to the energy. It has something else that comes about. We're not thinking in a responsible way. And the thing about December 26th is this is the day we have the full moon in Cancer. So everything that starts to go through Christmas evening, the energy that starts to play out over the next 24 hours following the moon's opposition to Mars directly leads into a lot of the energies that we're going to be dealing with in the full moon. So be aware of what you're doing. Christmas evening, again, the moon's opposition to Mars starts around 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, but literally 24 hours later at 6:30 on the 26th, 6:30 in the evening, that's the full moon in Cancer, guys. This is a very dynamic 24 hours. There's a lot of energy that starts to play through. I can't sugarcoat that. I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm being very realistic, and I've been warning of this week for months. And I don't like travel. This can be a heavy checkpoint night. This can be a night where we have a lot of car accidents. This can be a timeline of a lot of car accidents. And given Mars's influence that's starting to play into it, there can also be elements of road rage. I do not like travel this week. Okay, keeping this going. Oh. The moon square with Neptune goes the most exact between 11 p.m. Christmas night and 1 a.m. the 26th. Between 1 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., here's the moon in its opposition to Mercury. The moon is in Mercury's sign. So in a lot of ways, there's like this questioning of what were you thinking? What were you doing? Why would you do this? This is so out of character for you. We're trying to understand why someone's not behaving a certain way, why something has gone a certain way. There can also be a reflection of things that are going on in the body. Now, whenever it comes to the bodily things, when we get to that, when I do the full moon in Cancer video later this week, I will explain the bodily things there too, but this can also be a heavy night whenever it comes to people's health. Not just the influence of like taking too many drinks, but like a health thing can set in. So be aware of that. Okay. Moving this along. After the moon's opposition to Mercury, the moon goes void. So I don't like this night for people that work in the health profession. I really don't. But trying to get anything like fixed in the middle of the night, it's a holiday time span, like it's not going to happen. There's that human effect automatically. And then we get into the morning at 9:16 a.m. Central Standard Time. That is when the moon is going to go into Cancer. Now, with the moon going into Cancer, I want to be super clear for the next 2.5 days. So the rest of Tuesday, all of Wednesday, and most of Thursday, high emotional energy, triggering emotional energy. There is going to be something that comes through these few days that is going to change our mindset about a lot of things and how we progress forward. I've had a huge mental block of whatever's meant to happen in these few days because the human effect is that it needs to happen a certain way, that my intuition cannot interfere. It needs to happen a certain way. There's going to be a lot of disruption these days. And now the moon's in Cancer. A lot of emotional disruption, a lot of frustration, a lot of anxiety, and it's peeking into something else. Okay. After the moon goes into Cancer, the first thing that it's going to do is hit a trine from Saturn. So that goes the most exact between 1:30 and 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. I've got this at 2:30 right now. Here is Saturn, 2 degrees, 48 minutes of Pisces. Here's the moon, 2 degrees and 48 minutes. It's actually exact at 2:30. I didn't even have to try on that one. Saturn represents authority, responsibility, the elders, somebody that we view as a authority figure. So, and sometimes when I say authority figure, that can be the boss, that can be a police officer. But if you're having to go into a place, this can be the manager. Of needing to get something handled with an authority figure. It doesn't have to be an authority figure over us. It's just somebody that's an authority figure in what they do. There is an understanding that needs to be had with an authority figure. It's Capricorn season, guys. The sun is in Capricorn. And this, as we go through this full moon, we start to enter a trine with Saturn. There's emotional responsibility. There's having guidance on how to do something, on how to handle something, on how to turn something around, on how to fix something, on how to work through something. As we continue, the moon is going to perfect into its full moon, and this full moon will still be in the trine with Saturn. Here's the moon. Here's sun, 4 degrees, 55 minutes. Here's the moon at 4 degrees, 24 minutes. It actually goes the most exact at 6:33 p.m. So I've got this at 6:30. 4 degrees, 56 minutes, like we're right there. This full moon is in a sextile to Jupiter. Jupiter is slowing down to enter retrograde. Jupiter's retrograde will end at the end of this week. There's an emotional breakthrough. There's an emotional disruption. There are very confusing things that have the ability to be said somewhere between Christmas Day and December 26th that we can take the wrong way. Now, I've said for a while that the sun is in an Antiscia with Mercury. At the start of the retrograde, they were in an Antiscia. For those that don't know what an Antiscia is, this is basically like a secret opposition. We had the Mercury Cazimi. That's when we had the most amount of clarity in basically the entire month of December, it feels like, or at least since the retrograde. And then they started to go opposite. The sun kept progressing. The sun is trying to take a different role. The sun is trying to push something forward. A new level of responsibility. A new level of turning something around. But Mercury is still resistant. Even though we've seen something, we've recognized something that needed to be seen. There is a clarity in the energy. Even though we've seen something a certain way, some element has kept us from wanting to accept a change. We've still been resistant, regardless of what has been put in front of us. This full moon has the sun in an Antiscia to Mercury, but ironically enough, the moon itself is in a Contra-Antiscia to Mercury. So a Contra-Antiscia is a secret alliance. Our emotions that are coming through, it's confirming something, but Mercury is still retrograde. So this confirmation, this acceptance, this needing of something, this needing of support, something triggers very deeply in this full moon that leads to turnaround. It leads to the turnaround of Jupiter, where we have this need to be more focused on faith and hope and belief. Once we can conquer that faith energy of Jupiter, logic will follow. Quite literally, Jupiter will end its retrograde this week, and January 1st, Mercury will end its. Faith and hope, emotional healing is very, very necessary to turn something around. And I'll explain that more when I do the Cancer full moon video. The exact moon-Jupiter sextile is actually going to take place between 7 and 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I've got this at 8:30. The moon is just past its sextile with Jupiter. So Jupiter's at 5 degrees, 36 minutes. Here's the moon, 6 degrees. Like, it's just past it. There is an understanding of something from the past. There is this emotional need for someone to be educated about something, to get a better understanding of something, to break through some level of confusion. We need somebody else to enlighten us to something. And some of us, we are going to be the emotional ones on December 26th. We are going to be the ones like trying to figure something out. We're going to be the ones hurting. But some of us, we're going to be the ones trying to help somebody get over a situation, trying to be the support and the coping mechanism for another person to work through something, because we have a huge amount of disruption going on. Two of the energies that are building right now, that are not exact on the 26th, but they've been building all day, is one, and it's starting here at 8:30, and it's a better time to just show it. The sun is entering its trine to Jupiter. This is a luck energy. This is a profound energy of how we can restore faith. We can enlighten somebody to something on how to turn something around. And with the moon's energy involved too, like there's an emotional need for turnaround. But at the same time, we also have Neptune and its second square with Mercury. The last one occurred last month during the full moon in Gemini. We had a Mercury-Neptune square. That was November 26th, 27th, or 28th. It was that Monday. I think it was the 27th. We had some things that were starting to like come to the surface around that time that are now coming back around. And I've said, we've got some mundane examples of some things, like we did some shopping, we did some purchasing and things around that time. And now we're going to get to like the unveiling, the unboxing, and we're going to realize like, this was not a good gift. It's broken. Something's not right. And in the most mundane sense, we're going to be having to deal with like managers and stuff like that, the 26th and 27th, of how to get something fixed and how to get something repaired. That's a super mundane situation. But other people are going to find out other things. They're going to discover some level of discrepancy on their credit cards. They're going to discover something that takes a few days to get corrected, to get understood, to get fixed. There's going to be, if you bought electronics for people, whenever it comes to the holidays, this is not a good holiday for the brand new electronics. Some of them are not going to work right. Some of us are going to have SOS mode on our phone. It's super exciting. Mercury retrograde. Some of us are going to be in a very different mindset. And we're going to be dealing with things that are very, very trying to our patience. Okay. They can be turned around. They can be fixed. You have to be patient. Patience is not everybody's virtue, but we're going to keep going. We're going to get into the 27th. Now, the first thing that's going to occur is going to be the Mercury-Neptune square. And that is going to occur between 1:39, I added an extra one, 1:39 a.m. Central Standard Time and 2:02 a.m. Central Standard Time. So here's Mercury in the square to Neptune. If we are having a high anxiety evening, this can be where we get like some grand idea of how to fix something that other people do not understand. You don't even understand it. But given the fact that Venus is still in her trine to Mercury, logic is not our friend. And don't rely on logic. If your intuition is telling you to do something a certain way, try to lean into that, because there is a luck element building whenever we have the sun in this trine to Jupiter. And this is the saving grace of this second Mercury-Neptune square. If we didn't have this Sun-Jupiter trine of how we're illuminating an area of faith and illuminating an area of luck, illuminating how something needs to transition and shift for the long term, because again, Jupiter's in Taurus. If we don't lean into the elements of faith and we just try to make everything make logical sense, then we're not going to have any corrections until like the middle of January. So lean into the hope. And again, a lot of where we're at around these few days can feed back to energy that revealed itself back at the beginning parts of November, the middle parts of November, that led us into the transitional energy that we're in right now. Sorry, guys. Okay. Moving this along. Now, the other thing, the next thing that's going to happen, I shouldn't say the other thing, the next thing, I went to the wrong date. The sun is going to have its trine with Jupiter between 9:26 a.m. Central Standard Time and 9:49 a.m. Central Standard Time. So here is the sun, 5 degrees, 36 minutes. Here is Jupiter, 5 degrees, 36 minutes. These two are very exact. But the other thing that is also going on is Mercury and its conjunction to Mars. This is interesting to me. Whenever we go through this energy, there can be something that starts to take shape. Again, logic is not our friend. We have to lean into faith. And if we're leaning into the correct thing, then we can start to arrive to something that can manifest into something very, very big, that can be very, very hopeful, that can be very, very helpful. But if we're not leaning into our intuition, if we're leaning more into our ego, this is not a good week for ego, by the way, then what we can lean into is something that can be very, very disruptive. And that can really start to take shape as the 27th continues. If you're trying to have everything a certain way because this is just how I want it, and you're not necessarily putting the bigger picture and the bigger factor into play, then this is going to be a harder energy to deal with. Logic is not your friend. Remember, the sun's trine to Jupiter can be very, very hopeful, can be very, very helpful. And the other thing that's going to occur in the middle part of the day is the sun is going to have its exact Antiscia to Mars. Now, this happens around 1:50 p.m. This is pretty close. So those that have not heard me talk about Anticias before, like basically if I was to fold the chart at the solstice line, the winter solstice line, the sun and Mars would fold on top of each other. It would create a secret opposition. That opposition would be two areas of life that would normally never have an opposition. And we can have a certain type of opposition that happens here, but this is a direct opposition. Not only that, this is a reborn Mars. The sun and Mars have been very, very close to each other for getting close to 2.5 months now. This energy here can show direction. This energy here can show the need for a disruption. There can be something that is very blindsiding because, again, with Mars's energy here, we are blinded by something. There's something that's meant to come to light and come about in a very certain way. And it can start to come through around this time. But there's an energy here whenever it comes to the sun and Mars that almost feels like a jump start. The sun is in a trine to Jupiter. Mars is in Jupiter's sign. This can either be the most dynamic energy in regards to taking off on something, again, believing in faith, believing in hope, or it can create a hellacious disruptive energy in the household where you would normally not have disruption, where you would normally not have a frustration. There can be something that very much illuminates into disruption. And we really start to feel it. Emotional disruption, disruption in our mindset. There's so much going on right here because not only do we have the sun and Mars in their Antiscia, but we also have Mercury re-entering its conjunction to Mars. This can be a combative energy. This can be a frustrating energy. It really kind of comes down to where you're at as these days are progressing. You're going to know if you're on the right path or not. You're going to know if you're doing the right thing or not. You're going to know if you are taking the right steps as we get into this week, because you are either going to be feeling the momentum of how something changes, or you're going to be going through all the levels of physical disruption that force you to change your mind. You know which one you are, or by the end of the week, you're going to know which one you are. Whew. Okay. In the evening time, so around 6:30 is where I'm going to get it next. That is when Mars and Mercury have their exact conjunction. Now, this is going to be the most exact between 6:28 p.m. Central Standard Time and 6:35 p.m. Central Standard Time. Now, there's two things that has gone on the 27th. This is the second one. We had the second Mercury-Neptune square. The first one happened back at the end of November, around November 27th. But this is also the second Mercury-Mars conjunction. This second Mercury-Mars conjunction can also bring back another round of old things. I don't feel like a lot of us are going through new things. I feel like we're going through some old things in a lot of ways. We're catching people in lies. We're catching people doing something shady. We're catching people in the act. And this is where I feel like we can have the most argumentative and combative and frustrating energy. And some element of this, since this is the second Mercury-Mars square, can tie back to the weekend of October 28th and October 29th. October 28th was the eclipse that occurred. That eclipse, that out-of-sign eclipse in Taurus, happened where? At 5 degrees. 5 degrees, where Jupiter is at right now, where the Sun-Jupiter trine is going through, 5 degrees. Okay? Oh, this gets really heavy and really thick. I'm going to say thick. I don't want to know if I say heavy. Thick. We're just going to keep layering it on. Okay? That Mercury-Mars conjunction that occurred the next morning on October 29th, and that occurred in an opposition to Jupiter. Yeah. Think back to what happened during the eclipse, what happened that last few days of October, what was going on those last few days of November, because whatever we start to really go through on the 27th, this is the next layer of previous energies, of long-standing situations. Very little of this is going to be raw, brand new. But again, this is Mercury retrograde in its detriment. The moon is in Cancer. We're still riding a full moon's energy. This isn't the full moon day. This is 24 hours after the full moon. Because the full moon perfected at 6:33, December 26th. That's a lot, guys. There's a illumination. There's a disruption. I do not like travel. I do not like travel. We will have issues with electronics. We're going to have issues with certain things, but a lot of, for us, whatever the issue is, regardless of how big or little it is, for some people, it's going to be really small, mundane things. That's good. That means you are in alignment. For other people, it's going to be massive things that's going to force and pivot you to stop being resistant to something. Quite deeply, to stop being resistant to something. And this can be the most heavy, heart-wrenching disruption for some people. There's a lot of weight. There's a lot of layers. The air is thick. Our emotions are building. And again, faith and hope will overrun logic. It needs to. We have to believe, and we have to have hope, and we have to have faith. Okay. The next thing that's going to occur on the 27th is going to be the moon's sextile to Uranus. And I don't know what this disruption is for everybody. This can be an argument, this Mercury-Mars conjunction. This can be an actual car accident. This can be something that leads back to, again, a prior situation that happened before, and we hit the next round of tension or argument tied to a prior situation. But the moon's sextile to Uranus feels like it's something completely separate. This feels like it's you're getting the call from your sister or your brother, your a family member, a friend, going, "You will not believe the day I have had." Girls same, boys same. Oh my God, bro, I can't even believe it. And this is like that emotional, like, I need to get this off my chest. Whatever you are telling to somebody else is super surprising, and vice versa. Whatever they're telling to you is super off the wall. And this, in the evening time, feels like a sudden shake. It feels like a moment where we catch our breath and we can like voice our opinion about something. We can talk about something. We will have something shocking that gets told to us. Even though if we've been in the most mundane situations, there will be a shockingness in a lot of ways whenever it comes to the moon and that sextile to Uranus. But given that Uranus is still retrograde, where whatever it is, we're not anticipating it. Okay. Moving this along, we're going to get into the 28th. There's a lot of movement to the 28th. And a lot of people are going to have a hard time sleeping. the mental anxiety being as high as it is with Mercury in that conjunction to Mars, it's going to be a lot. Now, for some people, once we get into the early parts of the 28th, when the moon goes through its trine with Neptune, there can be, again, something that needs to affect the senses, but I have this medicinal feel for a lot of people. Some people, we need to deal with something that ties to medicine. Sometimes we're waiting to see how something is going to work. We're waiting to see an effect in some way with Neptune in the trine to the moon. And Neptune's being in the higher authority. But remember, Mars and Mercury are still in the square to Neptune. So there can be an action that is being taken that we don't know is going to work, or not everybody's in agreement on how to do it. Or you're telling somebody that you're going to do something and they have absolutely, they just don't understand it. They're so clueless. And it's one of those things that if you're telling somebody, like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go in this direction. I'm going to go in this way. I've decided to do this. Wow, you've literally decided to do this in the last 3 days? Yeah, I have. They're not going to know how to respond. They're not going to know how to react. They're going to be very indifferent to it. And it's really one of those things that if you are in that situation that you have no idea what somebody's about to do, you don't completely understand it, but you're like, oh, okay, this is how you feel. You do you, babe. Okay. With the moon being in Cancer, we do have a bit of an emotional consideration that can be involved. A lot of what's going on right now ties back to previous situations. And there can be something here that speaks to, like, I have an idea of how to fix it. I don't know if this is going to work. It's worth a shot. Okay, babe, you do what you think is the right thing to do. You take those appropriate steps. You take that appropriate action. I might not agree with it. I might not even understand it. But you do you. Now, for those that are more intuitive, the overnight hours of Wednesday into Thursday, given that the moon will be getting closer and closer to a trine with Neptune, there can be a lot of dream energy here. You can have certain downloads that come through your dreams. You can have certain things start to come through in your little manifestation messages. Be aware of that dream energy whenever it happens. Okay. Now, as we progress through the day, the moon is going to go into a trine with Venus and almost simultaneously enter in opposition to Pluto. And I think this is really interesting because at the beginning of this month, when the moon was in Cancer last, ironically enough, Venus was right here in Libra. The moon made a square to Venus right before Venus made a square to Pluto. And while Venus was in Libra, the only planetary aspect that she truly made that had any type of harsh sense of Venus's rebalancing energy that we got was the moon, was Venus in her square to Pluto. But that happened right before Venus went into Scorpio. So there was something about being a trigger of transformation that was a push to overcome a fear, a push to overcome something that speaks back to things that happened. Again, the last few days of November to the first few days of December. We're not in new energy. We're actually taking existing energy into the next level. We're pushing for the next part of progression. We're pushing for the next part of a transition. At that time, we were pushing. This is not a push anymore. And I have really felt that Venus's energy of going through Scorpio is almost like a baptism. We're healing deep-seated wounds. And we've had elements of trying to heal very deep-seated wounds. And there's something very emotionally cleansing that comes through around the 28th. The 28th, 29th, the rest of the week, I like these days better. I don't like the first few days of this week. This feels like we have the ability to overcome a fear. Venus is in Pluto's sign. Venus is entering her sextile to Pluto. The moon is going to trine Venus. We have an emotional crack. We have an emotional understanding. We are being supportive to somebody very emotionally. By having Venus entering her sextile to Pluto, this tells me that the moon triggers something that needs to happen between Venus and Pluto. And this is actually going to happen over the next 24 hours before Venus changes signs. We have this ability to do this major emotional overcoming. And this too can speak to something that needs to be tied to faith in another way. Because the other thing that's starting to happen in the later parts of December 28th is Mars will go through its exact square with Neptune. When we get to this part of the 28th, something is meant to come to light. Something is meant to be understood. Things that have been buried deep within, things that have been going on below the surface, whether that is below the surface of the floor, in the pipes, in the house, in the wood, in the frame, whether it's below the surface in the body, in the mind, in the emotions, there's something that we need to work through. But we needed to have something disruptive trigger a shift in our mind to slow down a thought process to be able to have certain conversations. And the second half of this week can have profound healing energy. And it can be a push and a test to what's right in regards to how we progress. This isn't over. Venus's trine with the moon goes the most exact between 3 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. The moon's opposition to Pluto gets felt between 4 and 6 p.m. So these are happening simultaneous. And at 4:15 to 4:46, so I now have this at 4:30, that's when Mars will have its exact square with Neptune. I actually looked back. So Mars square Neptune, only in this regard, where Mars is in the higher authority, only happens once every 2 years. Now, the thing about last year, that Mercury retrograde that we had in Gemini, we had multiple squares between Mars and Neptune, but not all of them. But Neptune was in the higher authority. So there was a deceptive energy. There was things that was fogging our senses. There was things that were disrupting things in regards to what we were trying to work through last year. We are no longer in the same level of disruption. In fact, we are going into a whole new level of territory. And I went back and I looked. The last 2 times that we had Mars square Neptune, where Mars was in the higher authority, I was still in home building. And ironically enough, even though they happened at 2 very different times, each time we had Mars square Neptune, I was setting sales goals. Whether they were my own sales goals, like I met with whoever my authority figure was at the time and I set my goals, or I was the sales manager and I was setting like team goals, whatever it was. There was something about setting an expectation, setting up in some ways a dream, determining something. A determination becomes very involved. Whenever you work in sales in some way, you have to be able to sell sometimes that's something that's not there. You have to sell a dream. You have to work through something that isn't tangible. There's a determination that can also set through in this energy in how we overcome a fear and how we overcome a past trauma and how we allow for something to heal moving forward. And this can be a very profound healing energy that starts to set in late on the 28th. We needed something to trigger us to allow this healing to happen. Okay. I'm going to keep going with this. The moon's going to go into Leo. That's going to happen at 6:24 p.m. Central Standard Time. Once the moon goes into Leo, our awareness of something, our awareness of a responsibility, our awareness of a role, it's there, but we're still trying to process the final elements of resistance. And if you are in this area where you are trying to support somebody, but they're being a dick to you, they're still holding a grudge, they're still not over their crap, they're still not over everything, or you're trying to set something in motion, but the The mindset is still not there. There's still some level of resistance. Just be patient. Some of you, you're about to change your mind on something and you're just trying to understand it. Once the moon goes into Leo, it's really funny. The sun, which rules Leo, is in Capricorn. It's in its fall. It's not in a good place. It's in Saturn sign. The sun doesn't do well in Saturn signs. We can be very indifferent to somebody that's willing to help us, to people within authority. We can feel like there can be a stubborn energy whenever it comes to certain authority figures for the next few days. And again, it's just part of where we need to overcome something. It's part of where we need to overcome something. It's part of where we need to come to terms with something. And I feel like the whole time the moon is in Leo, we're going to go through this peak of letting our guard down, of putting more trust into certain people, of reestablishing some level of faith and hope and connection. And this also speaks through Venus and this sextile to Pluto, with Venus being in Pluto's sign. This energy right here is why I feel like parts of Venus going through Scorpio has been a bit of a baptism. There's so much level of emotional healing that we can feel ourselves transitioning into. We can feel ourselves trying to restore, but there's still elements of being stubborn, and we need to allow for certain things to kind of process. So any type of stubborn energy that you run into, the later parts of the 28th, the 29th, the 30th, just deal with them. They're not going to last for very long, and there will be things that shake people out of that type of energy. Okay. Moving this along. We're going to get into the 29th. Here we go. The moon is in Leo. And in the exact sextile with Venus and Pluto, that starts to take place in the overnight hours of the 28th going into the 29th. So we have at 11:54 p.m. Central Standard Time to 12:13 a.m. I've got this at 12:30. That is whenever Venus and Pluto will go through their exact sextile. But this is also happening at the 29-degree mark. We're pushing to overcome a fear. We're pushing to overcome the past, overcome a trauma. We need to get deep-seated wounds brought to the surface, deep-seated levels of understanding and healing, actions in faith, actions in belief, overcoming certain things and changing our mindset. It's very deep in the energy. It's a carryover from the 28th into the 29th, and it continues going through. Between 4 and 6:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, so I've got this at 5:30, the moon is going to square Jupiter, and this will be the last Jupiter transit before Jupiter turns direct, and Jupiter turns direct on the 30th. There's going to be somebody that is stubborn. And they're going to try to get somebody to side with them or help them, or they're going to get somebody else's input. And it's along the lines of you should really change your mind. You should really get over it. You should really stop holding a grudge. You should really stop leaning into your ego. What? We can hear something very early on the 29th, whenever Jupiter's in that square to the moon. We can hear something that really tests our patience. And again, Jupiter is stationing to turn something around. We need to be more leaned into belief and faith than we do our ego. But there's going to be some people, you don't know how to get out of your ego. This is a gut check for those people that are too stuck on their ego. And again, Jupiter's turning something around. Some people need a gut check. Some people need a reality check. The sun is still in a trine to Jupiter. So the last few days have allowed for a certain type of healing and understanding. that can illuminate of how a transition, the next stage of the transition is going to go. Because we are entering the next stage of the transition. But there's still going to be the stubborn people of, I don't want to change. You'll get over it. Okay. The Mars-Neptune square is still going to be active all day. It's just separating. We're trying to take a forward motion. We're trying to have a certain type of belief. We are trying to set a goal and move something forward in a certain way. And again, hope and faith over anything else. Venus is going to enter Sagittarius at 2:24 p.m. Central Standard Time. So we're at 2:30. Here is Venus at 0 degrees. And Venus going into Sagittarius now begins mutual reception. And from December 29th all the way to January 23rd, so basically for the next 3.5 weeks, we have mutual reception. And if you listen to the Mercury retrograde video, I said once we get to this point, Venus going into Sagittarius, Venus starts to set things straight. Her mutual reception with Jupiter is going to allow for a lot of corrective action. A lot of things that are going to get turned around. And you should be very, very aware of what both Sagittarius and Taurus rule in your charts, because this is the area where we're going to experience the most turnaround, where we're going to have the most levels of benefit. And if you are karmically in alignment, there's a lot of solutions that start to come through. And we start to feel them immediately upon Venus going into Sagittarius. But adding layers on top of that, the solutions are going to come through December 29th, 30th, 31st, January 1st, and January 2nd. Like, we really feel these days of how we're going to put something into order, how we're going to get something turned around, and how we're getting something fixed. The gears are shifting on the 29th. Moving this along. Right after Venus goes into Sagittarius, the other thing that hits this Mercury is going to get to 22 degrees. So I bumped this to 5:30 p.m. Here's Mercury at 22 degrees. Mercury is starting to station. Venus goes into Sagittarius and Mercury starts to station. Mercury starts to turn something around. Jupiter is about to turn something around. We have a lot of things that are going to flip very, very rapidly, very, very quickly. Big turnarounds in the energy. Okay. Let's start to get into the 30th. And in the early morning, between 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time and 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, the moon is going to square Uranus. Uranus is also stationing. Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. A lot of the things that we are dealing with right now through this Mercury retrograde is directly pushing for whatever is going to take shape once Pluto goes back into Aquarius. So be clued into this moon Uranus square, because there's an element here of, something being shaken, a sudden disruption, a sudden turnaround, a sudden removal of support based off of everything else that's being shaken up. There can be something that's very, very surprising. And if it's very surprising for some people, it can be a past situation, or it's going to be a long time decision coming that we haven't been willing to, accept was coming, or we don't know it's coming. And for some people, this is going to be blindsiding. And again, it's meant to make us stop and think. There's something very much in the energy to make us stop and think. It's meant to humble us. It's meant to humble that ego in so many ways. Okay. We need to get over a fear. We need to accept something in our heart. There's a faith element. There is a hopeful element. There's a big part of this energy that's meant to turn some things around. Now, the moon is going to trine Mercury between 2 and 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I've got this December 30th at 3:30. Here is the moon, 22 degrees of Leo, making a trine to 22 degrees of Mercury. Again, Mercury is stationing now. So we've had something over the course of the last few days that is meant to force us to change our mindset, is meant to force us to change our opinion. So many things have been like, look, if you can't get over it, then I can't have you in my life anymore. If you can't get these things fixed, then we're not going to be able to make any changes. There has been a huge element of understanding, like, you need to make a change. You need to stop resisting things. You need to fix this. You need to overcome this. You need to let something go. Allow for healing to come through. It's probably not the words people are going to use. That's dusty words, I know. You need to allow certain amounts of healing to come through, or we're not going to be able to continue. I can't let you stay in my life anymore. I can't let you be around the kids anymore. We can't continue. If you don't get your act together, you're not going to be here next year. If it's a work thing. There's some element here that is meant to create an understanding of how we can get something to come together. Now, please note how I just said that last part. There's meant to be an understanding that can allow for certain things to come together. The moon is in a trine to Mercury. Mercury is retrograde. So these two are actually moving towards one another. And the way we're going to end this Mercury retrograde, the moon will be in Virgo. The moon will be in Mercury's sign. Logic can change and it will change. It's just we're dealing with stubborn energy in these days. Some people just like to be stubborn. After the moon's trine with Mercury, and before the moon hits its trine to Mars, though, Jupiter is going to turn direct. So watch Jupiter. Get up to 7:30. 7:30. Oh, I should go to 8:30. Okay. December 30th, 8:30 p.m., Jupiter retrograde. Bump it 1 hour. 9:30 p.m., Jupiter direct. Right as Jupiter's turning direct, the moon is going to enter a trine with Mars. Mars is direct. Mars is starting to gain its sight. It is starting to gain a momentum. It is starting to see something take shape. Based off of the events of this week, Mars is gaining a whole different insight into something. And there is a shift in hope, a shift in belief, a shift in faith. There's so many shifts that are coming through right here. Okay, I'll listen. Okay, I'm willing to talk. Okay, I'll have this conversation. Okay, I'll work through this healing. Okay, I can support this action. I can support this activity. I don't believe the same things that you believe, but I can support you. Moon, trine, Mars. Mars is still in that square to Neptune. I don't know if I can believe this. I don't know if I'm going to believe that this is all going to go a certain way. I don't know, but I'm willing to talk about it. And there's something in this energy that's going to lead to a mental shift. This is where it's after the moon goes through its trine to Mars, and we start to get into the moon in Virgo, which that's actually going to happen the next morning, that we allow for something to come through. And there can be some excitement in the energy with the level of support that can come through. But after the moon's trine with Mars, the moon goes void. So there can be a lot of active, exciting energy or just feeling really hopeful. We've had this restoration with Jupiter just turning direct, so we can be feeling really, really hopeful. We can feel that shift in support. And then we get into Sunday, and we have the moon at 5:54 a.m. Central Standard Time. The moon will go into Virgo. The moon goes into Mercury's sign. We need to have a logistical, logical, communicative, new set of rules, new set of boundaries, new way of thinking, new way of connecting, new way of doing things that gets worked through these next few days. And we start to do this restorative energy once the moon goes into Virgo. So early morning, again, 5:54 a.m., the moon goes into Virgo. We keep this going between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. The moon is going to square Venus. Right after that, the moon is going to hit an opposition to Saturn. So here's the moon, 3 degrees, 16 minutes. Here's Saturn, 3 degrees, 13 minutes, still in the square to Venus. There's something that activates here in the conversations. Venus is correcting certain energies, is putting some things forward, is turning some things around on behalf of Jupiter. We're feeling things in our lives turn around. We're feeling things in the moment start to shift. And there is this interaction between Venus, loved ones, people that we care about, and authority and elders with Saturn. Responsibilities. How we can work through the past, how we can overcome certain things, how we can start to recognize that next round of healing in regards to connections with certain people in our lives. The moon is in Virgo. That's a mutable sign, transitional energy. Venus is now in Sagittarius. That's a mutable sign, transitional energy. Saturn is in a mutable sign. It is time for transition. Jupiter has just turned direct. One element of something has turned around. And now these next few days, we need to mentally turn something around. We need to physically, documentation-wise, logistically turn something around. There can be a certain type of agreements, a certain type of spoken things that start to get shifted in this energy. The moon is now in Mercury's sign, and Mercury is stationing. And over the next 36 hours, Mercury will end its retrograde, and there will be a huge logical shift to turn something around. And there's a healing and an understanding on how things progress, because after the moon's opposition to Saturn, the moon is going to trine Jupiter. So here's Jupiter, 5 degrees, 34 minutes. Here's the moon at 5 degrees, 15 minutes. It's close enough. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of mental energy. There's a lot of healing. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of faith. There's a lot of things tied to the guru, the teacher, the healer. So the doctor, the nurse, there's a lot of things that is meant to turn something around. And I'm telling you, there's going to be elements of this week that very, very much tie to, there we go, that very, very much tie to medical. I hate saying that. But there's something in that Mercury-Mars conjunction and knowing what Jupiter represents. There's something in that energy that for a lot of people, it is a carryover from something previous. So either we made a plan in late October, we bought tickets to something in late October, we made plans to travel, we had plans for a trip, we had something going on, we made the purchases of something, in late October or late November. And those things are what's coming full circle all in one point. There's a huge slew of so many different timelines that are coming together all at one point. This week, there's a lot of energy going into this week. If you're trying to be productive this week, you have it planned out, you're going to do all of these different things around the house, you might not get those done because so many things are going to start to happen with the people in your lives that you can't get any of that done. Some people are going to hit walls, metaphorical walls, energetic walls, spiritual walls, emotional walls. They're going to hit walls, and they're going to need to know how to get through it. They're going to need to know what the heck is going on. Message me. We'll talk. There's a reason I said that from the beginning of this episode, that whatever happens this week, I'm willing to do all of my services and all of my coaching, whether you've had a reading from me before or not, donation based for the next, I'm just going to say week. It's 8 days, but still for the next week. It's because I know you guys are going to need it. I know you guys are going to have a need for me in a different way. I don't know any other, I know a lot of other astrologers are out there, obviously, but most people do things from the mundane sense. I'm an intuitive astrologer. So my intuition tells me to do something. If my intuition tells me that this is going to be a shit show, I tell you guys it's going to be a shit show. I don't just say it in the sense of like, oh, look at this planet right here. No, I've said it from the beginning. I've said it for weeks. I don't like this week. I don't like this week for travel. I don't like this week for online purchases. Obviously, I don't like this week for technology. SOS mode. I don't even know what that is. I haven't had the chance to mess with it. But it is what it is. There's going to be so much disruption this week. But for some people, the disruption that's going to come through is meant to instigate a level of healing. You need that disruption to humble you, to make you rethink a situation, to make you stop being stubborn. And the more stubborn you're being about a situation, the harsher this energy is going to be. And if you understand that moving into it, if you understand that moving forward, it is what it is. However, some people are going to be blindsided. They're not going to know any way of how to handle it. And I hate that. I can't wrap everybody in bubble wrap. I can't even wrap myself in bubble wrap. I got to go through these transits too. And I'm anticipating that there's going to be something that pops up with my family this week. I'm the oldest of 16 kids, guys. Like, throw a dart at the board. Who knows? Who knows which one it is? But there's always one. Okay. After this week, I feel like the first week of January is going to be a hangover week. Like an emotional, energetic, mental hangover. But after we get into the other parts of January, there's a forward momentum that can set in. But for us to have the forward momentum, for us to understand how things are going to progress, for us to have the full understanding of how things will trek forward from here, we need the disruptions that come through this week. We need the energy tied to the full moon in Cancer. We need to really hone in on what the universe is telling us. There are lessons in this energy. I know I'm not completely clear with what's coming through, but I know there's disruption. Every time I try to center in on some of these days, I know whatever disruption is about to come through has to happen naturally. It's the human effect. There are some elements to this week that I know are very blocked, but I know that the week ends in a very healing type of energy. And I'm grateful for that. I'm trying to find the positive. It's going to be hard for everybody to see the positive whenever it comes to the middle parts of this week. But I'm telling you, once Venus goes into Sagittarius, it's a different ball game. There's going to be some people that they're going to go through things in the holiday where people are going to take something the wrong way. Sometimes people choose to take something the wrong way. They do it purposely. And they're going to try to get to people on their side. And they're like, do you know what they said? You know, but you're going to get called out on it. People are not going to believe you. They're still this way. They're still horrible. And like, no, they're not. I don't know why you think that. I don't know why you think that your sister is always trying to be against you. I don't know why you think dad hates you. Like, I don't know why you think this. I was there. I heard what dad said. You took it the wrong way. No, I didn't. And again, they're going to be stubborn. And something is going to come through that makes them change their mindset. The more stubborn you are, the harsher this reality is going to be. The harsher this situation is going to feel like. This is not a week to where you can do everything in the most logical way. You will be met with resistance. Faith, hope, healing is the best way to follow through this week. Understand that everything is a lesson. regardless of how big or how small. Everything this week is a lesson. That's how we get through this energy. And the way that we start 2024, January of 2024, is going to have a huge momentum that starts to build. And remember, whatever comes through the final days of this Mercury retrograde, which this isn't even the final day, like the final day is technically January 1st, is meant to shape the energy tied to when Pluto goes back into Aquarius. Because whatever we were trying to see earlier this year when Pluto took its pinky toe dip into Aquarius back in March, April, May, and June, it was a glimpse. It was a glimpse of that power. It was a glimpse of that change. It was a glimpse of a transformation. But we weren't all ready for it yet. We had to purge. We had to let go of some things. We had to lose some things. We had to humble ourselves. There is a huge momentum that will pick up once we get into January. There's a huge element of how we push through things once we get into January. But we have some hiccups that are going to come through this week that, again, are going to prepare us for what comes next. Okay. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy everything. Whatever it's Hanukkah, I know Hanukkah's over. Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate, Yule, the solstice, happy everything. I love and appreciate every single one of you. I know I'll be hearing from lots of people this week, so I look forward to talking to everybody very, very soon. Subscribe.